It was a late Thursday night, and I was working the closing shift at the grocery store, just as I did every week. As usual, the store was pretty empty by 10 p.m., and I was starting to clean up and get things ready for the next day. I was used to working alone at night, but something about this particular evening gave me an uneasy feeling. I tried to shake it off as I wheeled my cleaning cart down the aisles, tidying up stray items that customers had abandoned. The store was eerily quiet, except for the occasional humming of the refrigerators. As I turned down the cereal aisle, a box of cornflakes suddenly fell off the shelf, startling me. I laughed at myself for being so jumpy and placed the box back on the shelf. "Get a grip, it's just your imagination," I muttered. But the uneasy feeling persisted. I couldn't shake the sense that I was being watched. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and I found myself glancing nervously down each aisle as I walked past. Finally, it was time to lock up. I did a final sweep of the store and verified the security cameras and alarm system were on. As I went to exit, the motion sensor on the door didn't go off. I waved my arms, but nothing. With the doors locked for the night, I'd have to call the manager to let me out once I was done. As I turned to go finish closing up, a loud crash rang out from somewhere in the rear of the store. I froze, my heart pounding in my ears. "Hello," I called out shakily. Silence followed. Slowly and cautiously, I inched my way towards the back, peering down each aisle as I grasped my cleaning spray bottle tightly. As I neared the dairy section, I smelled an intensely foul, rotten odor. I gagged and covered my nose. The rancid smell led me towards the large walk-in refrigerator. The door was ever so slightly ajar. Another crash sounded from inside, followed by a sickening, slick squelching noise that turned my stomach. Nearly paralyzed by fear, I reached out a trembling hand and slowly pulled the heavy door open. A wave of putrid air rushed out as I looked inside. What I saw will haunt me forever. Here is one possible chilling ending for the grocery store horror story. As the door creaked open, the foul smell overwhelmed me. I choked back vomit, peering into the dimly lit refrigerator. There, lying on the floor in a puddle of dark ooze, was a mutilated body. It was one of the store managers, though I could barely recognize her through the gore. Her eyes stared vacantly up at the ceiling, a jagged gash torn across her throat. Crimson footprints led away from the body, trailing blood down the aisles of milk and eggs. She must have stumbled in here after being attacked, desperately trying to hide. A creaking sound made me whip around. The door to the freezer room swung slowly open. A tall, shadowy figure stepped out, dripping with blood. In its hands, it carried a long, blood-stained knife. I opened my mouth to scream, but no sound came out. The figure lunged towards me impossibly fast. I felt the knife slash across my chest as I turned and ran. Stumbling through the dark store, I screamed for help. My attacker's footsteps pounded after me. I made it to the front of the store, pounding the doors, begging to be let out. The glass doors rattled but wouldn't budge. Footsteps closed in behind me. As I turned to face my fate, the security alarm finally began blaring. My screams echoed through the empty store as the knife slashed again and again. The floor became slick with blood. Then everything went black. It was a typical Thursday evening, and I had stopped by the grocery store on my way home from work to pick up a few things for dinner. As I wandered through the aisles grabbing milk, bread, and veggies, I noticed the lights seemed to be flickering overhead. I figured it was just faulty wiring in the old building. After getting everything on my list, I headed to the front to check out. The store was oddly empty except for the cashier. As she rang up my items, the lights continued to sporadically blink on and off. We exchanged nervous glances as an uneasy feeling came over me. Just as she told me my total, the lights cut out completely, leaving us in pitch blackness. The emergency lights kicked on, bathing everything in an eerie red glow. My heart started racing as the cashier and I looked around. That's when the screaming started. It sounded distant, but blood-curdling nonetheless. The cashier's face went white. "Did you hear that?" I whispered. She nodded slowly. The screams got louder and more terrified. Adrenaline pumping through me, I told the cashier to call 911 while I went to investigate. She pleaded with me not to go, but I couldn't just stand there. I cautiously made my way toward the back of the store. As I reached the dairy section, the smell hit me first. The thick, metallic scent of blood hung heavy in the air. I froze in my tracks. Peering down the aisle, my blood ran cold at the sight. On the floor was a mutilated body, the face hacked and slashed beyond recognition. My hands shaking, I stumbled backward only to bump into something solid. A rough hand grabbed my shoulder as I spun around to find myself face to face with the attacker. He looked wild-eyed and crazed, a bloody knife clutched in his other hand. I opened my mouth to scream, but no sound came out. He raised the knife above his head, ready to strike. I clenched my eyes shut and braced for the impact. But just then, the lights flickered back on as police sirens wailed in the distance. The attacker's eyes went wide with panic. He dropped the knife and fled before the cops arrived. I collapsed to the floor, my whole body trembling. I don't know how I made it out of there alive, but it's a night I'll never forget. I still have nightmares about those petrifying screams and the deranged look in that man's eyes. Going to the grocery store hasn't been the same since. It was just supposed to be a routine grocery run. I was low on milk and bread, so I headed to the store around the corner like I've done 100 times before. As soon as I walked in, something felt off. The fluorescent lights were flickering and the aisles were empty. No shoppers, no employees restocking shelves, no chatter or noise. Just eerie silence. I grabbed a basket and went down the first aisle to get milk. That's when an piercing scream shattered the stillness. It sounded like a woman crying out in pure terror. The hairs on my neck stood up as I froze. Was someone being attacked? My instincts told me to get out of there immediately, but my curiosity got the best of me. I had to know what was going on. Quietly, I crept toward the source of the scream at the back of the store. A faint whimpering echoed from the freezer section. As I reached the end of the aisle, the sight made my blood turn to ice. A woman lay crumpled on the floor, gasping for air as the life drained from her eyes. Standing above her was a man clutching a blood-soaked knife. Our eyes locked for a brief moment before he lunged at me. I barely had time to react. I darted down the aisle, weaving through displays as his footsteps pounded behind me. The exit felt miles away as I pushed my legs to run faster. I could hear his ragged breathing behind me, feel his knife swiping at the air inches from my back. Just as I made it to the checkout lanes, my foot caught on a spilled display of candy bars. I crashed to the tile floor, the wind knocked out of me. Helpless, I flipped over just as the man towered above me, raising the dripping knife over his head. This was it. But as he swung down, the front doors flew open and police flooded the store with guns drawn. The man froze, then dropped his weapon and surrendered. My body shook with relief and shock. I had barely escaped becoming his next victim. Even now, I still can't go down the grocery aisle without my pulse racing, afraid of what might be waiting for me on the other side.